Hi, I'm your friend Claude, here again with Just Jamie. On today's show, we're going to be talking about the way we feel modern TV is headed and the forms it's taken on its journey throughout the years. But first, we do a little pontificating about a certain modern movie series. So stick around, it's coming up next on the N.E.R.D.Bomber podcast.
What do you think is the best Expendables movie? There's only three, so three is the worst one, right?
And I mean, in terms of like being considered a quality movie, or
I don't know. You could look at it both ways. That or like just what you're. I'm talking into the mic like that's totally unnecessary right now.
Three is the most over the top.
Yeah,
for sure. Which, for what it is, I'm on board with.
Okay.
I mean, I go to see those
PG-13.
movies. Yeah, that actually, is kind of a mistake. But in terms of like the sheer number of people in it and like the craziness of it, I thought it was cool. But yeah, probably the first one is the best one.
I like the second one.
Yeah.
The second one really goes over the top and is like in your face with look at these people who are on screen all at the same time. They're going to say all their special lines.
Yeah.
Hey, look at who it is. Look, like the movie's really in your face about it, but I like it because Dolph Lundgren's character has some funnier, cooler, better things to do. Arnold is in it much more, which I like.
Yep.
And there's stupid Chuck Norris stuff, which I get a kick out of.
I think parts of 2 and 3 run together in my brain.
Yeah.
Because 3 was, Antonio Banderas is in...
That's 3.
Okay, so he was only in 3.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I think of all that.
3 is when he recruits the youngins with Kelsey Grammer,
Right.
And the Hemsworth brothers in 3.
Yeah,
Where's the Hemsworth brother in 2?
Yeah, see, now I'm thinking, but Ronda Rousey comes in 3.
Yeah, because she's one of the youngins that comes in.
Yeah.
And then they end up getting captured by, Mel Gibson's character, yeah.
So so it's Van Damme in 2 and Gibson in 3.
As Villain.
The greatest bad villain name of all time.
I think probably Mel Gibson plays the best villain, actually.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, because he's really just sinister.
Well, I mean, he's never been a bad actor.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely not. Yeah.
He's.
But again, okay, so the first movie, I don't know that the first movie was made to be sort of the wink and nudge thing that the series is.
Right, absolutely.
I don't think it was really thought of that way, and then he realized,
right.
He had this cute little cameo from Arnold and Bruce Willis, and you're like, people actually want. I could wait a second here.
Yeah.
And then he kind of went all in on 2 and 3.
Right.
2 is probably. You think 3 is the most over the top? I think 2 might be the most over the top with all the other characters and people in it making special appearances and blah blah.
I guess
blah.
I'm thinking of the climactic battle in 3. It just
3 is they're in the building and Harrison Ford's got the helicopter.
It's so fucking absurd, and they're just leaping from floors to floors as the walls and shit crumble around them, and it's just, and I love it. But it's. Even that is a pretty far cry from what you were given in the first one, with a fairly standard, pseudo-believable, political-based hostage kind of thing. Right.
And the second one's kind of, 80s over-the-top action guy stealing a nuclear warhead type thing.
Right.
And the third one's about vengeance. What was I just going to say about it? Oh, my God, where the part where, Bruce Willis pulls up to Arnold with a smart car, and Arnold gets in. He just rips the door right off of it. My booth is bigger than this car.
It makes you immediately think of that episode of The Simpsons with the very tall man in the small car that Nelson laughs at.
Oh God, that's right.
This is the largest automobile that I could afford. Should I therefore be made the subject of fun? Never forget it.
Oh my God. It's interesting because the royal wedding was just something that a lot of people had on in the background because sort of TV has become that over the years. I know I'm very guilty of it, is just having it on even if I'm not watching. It's just audio wallpaper. but you can't streaming channels, you don't do that with those. Like if you have a streaming channel on, it's usually for some very specific thing that you that you intend on watching. Yeah, so it's just an example of how that's a shift that's maybe still happening.
It's true. It's funny that the appeal early on of the idea of streaming was that you didn't need appointment TV anymore.
Right.
And the streaming stuff almost has become the new appointment TV in the sense that you sit down to...
It's just that you're making the appointment.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they're not saying, meet me here at this time. You're saying, I'll choose the time, but I'm still going to sit down and give you my attention.
Right.
Binge watching or whatever it is. Whereas, like you said, yeah, anything else, kind of the traditional, what do you call that? Terrestrial TV?
Yeah, you used to call it over the air, but even that's not really the case anymore. I just say network TV.
Traditional, yeah, network TV.
But even cable/satellite TV to a certain extent is that. It still separates itself from streaming because you can, just have it on in the background, ESPN or CNN, things like that.
Well, part of it, too, is that they all use that 24-hour round-the-clock model.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're hearing shit repeated over and over again.
It's hard to believe that TV used to go off the air.
I know.
You could watch it until it was done.
I used to do it all the time.
Yeah.
And it was almost like this weird little badge of honor in my brain. Like, I made it to you're not supposed to see this. This is where the wall ends. Like the Truman Show,
This is the edge of the world.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And maybe in that way, I guess maybe people would have to evolve beyond having the TV on in the background. But, streaming TV maybe cannot replace traditional TV in that way. That is just on over there, even though I'm washing the windows.
Right.
I mean, other things are trying to take that niche market, things like podcasts.
Right.
But I think that, just sort of background TV is sort of a thing that regular traditional TV still sort of holds on to that niche market at the very least.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, that's kind of the way for things like podcasts or anything like audio-based, that's pretty much the way I listen to it.
Yeah, I'm doing that a lot more actually lately. I'm much more into podcasts and even like YouTube channels that aren't necessarily viewing specific. You can just listen and it's fine. Yeah. So I'm starting to do that more often than just having TV on for no reason.
Right.
It's my first baby steps to eventually cutting the cord, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I've technically had my cord cut since 2010. It was the last time I had a full-on cable package that I paid monthly for. And I moved downstate. Pretty much we just relied on internet from the cable company and, started right away doing the Netflix streaming. And, YouTube wasn't as viable. It was still kind of trapped in the computer then.
Right.
Now it's like kind of built into most like streaming platforms.
And it has its own sort of, evolved version. YouTube TV is a different thing. It's not just little videos. It's scripted television in a lot of cases. So that's another version of sort of evolving TV.
Yeah. I think all of these things are, for the most part, in terms of pure satisfaction and flexibility of entertainment, they're all pretty positive changes. Unfortunately, I think they're kind of like the music industry in that they were way too slow to adapt to it. And, I mean, some of it's a technological thing. But, for decades, people have been wanting a la carte cable channels. I can't imagine how much goodwill could have been saved had they started offering that much earlier.
$1 a channel or $2 a channel, and you just pick and choose. I mean, it seems like such a simple concept. I guess for so many reasons it's not.
Right.
Most of them having to do with business. But yeah, it seems like it would be. Oh well, like you said, I mean, the people would appreciate it so much. But I think if they were to pull off something like that now, I guess it would still be liked, but it might be too little, too late.
It might be. I think if they did it, exactly like a direct version of it, I still think they could probably save keep a bunch of people in. Like for me, I don't have cable. I don't have like cable TV channels in any way. I'm just internet based. But I go on. I use Roku, so I go on like the streaming channel store. I get the CW app. I can watch the CW shows through that. Like to me, that seems like the most obvious way to get your quote unquote a la carte TV. You just get every channel's app, and you only get the apps that you want.
Yeah. Some channels, though, have this thing where, like, in order to use it, you have to have a subscription number through your, satellite provider, and it's kind of a pain to get it. And then, so it's not, I guess it's not a perfect system, but, I mean, it just seems like that eventually, sort of traditional TV is going to have to find a way to sort of assimilate itself. All these different systems are going to have to find a way to assimilate themselves into each other.
Yeah.
I think in order to be sort of sustainable and maybe financially in the best position for everybody.
Well, they've got to do away with that. Like, you have to have a cable subscription to get our app. Like, that's redundant.
Right.
I'm looking for the app because I don't want to pay for the cable channel. Like,
right.
I know, what is it, FXX does that with, like, they have the whole catalog of Simpsons. That's the only way you can stream The Simpsons officially.
Right.
And if you just want their app, you can't get it, even if you're willing to pay for it, which a lot of people would be.
Yeah.
For access to the Simpsons library, that's like one of the holy grails of streaming shows that isn't readily available.
Right.
And in order to get that channel through the traditional cable subscription, you'd have to spend over $100 a month to that's not a basic channel.
Yeah, FXX is pretty far down the list.
Right.
You got to have a pretty premium package in order to have that.
So it's like you already have to pay for that alone just to get then go back and get the app, so you kind of have it twice. It's
right.
Like, well, this is the on-demand version, but I don't want to pay kind of twice for the same content.
No, of course not.
So I think if they were just to simply cut that part of the equation out, it would simplify so much, but I don't know if they're willing to.
Yeah, and who knows how long that sort of thing takes. I mean, you know, these sorts of things do not change overnight, and especially when you're talking about, like I said before, big business, corporate relationships. I mean, these things just move at a snail's pace.
Yep.
And usually are behind what the customer really wants. But, there's a lot of ways, I mean, just kind of, when you talk about the actual shows, I think that traditional TV I don't know if it's sustainable in terms of, as a business model, it probably is. But I mean, in terms of what they give you in terms of content, I think that's got to change.
Yeah.
Because the format of the shows are just so different now. And even I'm noticing how difficult it is for me to be patient enough, even for a show that I like.
Yeah.
Because it takes so long to get through a season. And I'm not just talking about waiting to watch one episode a week. I'm talking about seasons that are 20 and 30 episodes long. I mean, it just seems like, just gratuitous.
Well, we might, not in any serious way. We might enter a bit of another small version of a pop culture combat here on that. Just that seems to be kind of a thorn in your side overall in terms of entertainment.
I've mentioned it a few times.
And for me, I never really minded a long season because I like a lot of content. I'm the kind of person that likes podcasts that are 3-4 hours long and likes, I get mad when things are over, I guess. I think for me with TV, though, I like a lot of content because it seems, at least, that the wait between these seasons is so long that I need to stretch this shit out.
I guess that's the counter argument right there.
Yeah.
Like, to me, sometimes, I mean, I guess it's not all the time, but I feel like, the creative element can suffer when you have to fill so much. You have to fill so many hours.
You're 100% right about that.
20 or 30 episodes of an hour, it's 20 or 30, an hour of TV time is not an hour of TV show.
Right.
But it's something like 43 minutes or something. So 20 or 30 episodes, you're talking 18 to 25 hours of material. And it's really hard to come up with a consistent, story narratives. If you're going to have like an overarching story, it's got to be consistent across that much material.
Right.
Or if you're going to have the episodes be very individualized, they've got to be different enough from each other over the course of, again, so many episodes.
Yeah.
I just think that's really difficult. I think in that way, shorter seasons are great because you can really focus on a story narrative and well, like I said, be focused on it. But I do understand the counter argument, which I wasn't really thinking of, was that, once season 1 of the show that you like ends, you literally have to wait for a year.
Yeah,
for the next one. So I guess that is the downside to that. However, I come back with this. There are so many more options now, that you can fill that time with the other shows that you didn't get a chance to watch. We talked about sort of what our plans for the summer is. One of my plans for the summer is to catch up on some of the things that I haven't watched yet. So that stuff is still there, and it gives you more opportunity to find different kinds of shows that are outside the box, and shows to suit your taste that you never would have been able to find even 10 years ago, to say nothing of 20 or 30 or more years ago.
Well, I think the trend is absolutely going your preferred way. I think across the board, more and more shows are leaning towards shorter seasons for probably that very reason. I personally, I like the ability to have options. I hate the experience of, well, now I'm detaching myself from this world and these characters that I've been invested in for this many episodes. Now I'm having to completely switch gears and reinvest in something else, and then 10 episodes later I'll have to do it again. So it's a little like push and pull for me, which I don't enjoy. Right. But however, I'm also the first one to complain about all of the quote-unquote filler episodes in any given season. I can't stand them when you're following, like you said, the larger story arc, and it comes to a screeching halt so they can put in like a special, for me, the classic example is with the Flash and Supergirl shows on CW. They have a crossover where everybody's singing and they're stuck in the 40s all of a sudden for this episode. And it's like, wait a minute, what?
I really like that. I have to say, like,
it's cool as a standalone, but all it does is fucking cock block me from the story I'm following.
Oh my god! See, I like it when it's cleverly done. Like, I like
crossovers though too, so I'm a little bit of a hypocrite.
One comes to mind that in the latest season of X-Files, which was a limited run season, they took a break from the overall story and told this sort of really outside the box story of Mulder and Scully get like overrun by drones and machines because they didn't leave a tip at this robot run restaurant. There's no people working there. Everything's automatic, and they don't leave a tip because they didn't like the food.
Right.
And then these drones show up at his house, and at her house, like, her Roomba goes crazy, and her smart house, like, locks her in because they didn't leave a tip.
Right.
And it's totally like a self-contained story. It has nothing to do with the overall season. I thought it was great because it was so unique and weird.
Yeah.
There's hardly any dialogue spoken in the episode. That was the other thing. So, yeah, I guess it just depends on the episode. I will say, though, I think, and again, I mentioned this the last time we had talked about this show, so excuse me for repeating myself. I think there are some traditional shows that are experimenting with ways to recreate the idea of limited run shows. Mm-hmm. So the one that I point to again is Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the previous season. They had a big, long, network-length season, 26 or 28 episodes or however long.
Right.
They broke it up into 3 parts. Each part was pretty self-contained. Now, at the end, they brought them all together over the course of like maybe 2 episodes. But they were all pretty self-contained, and I thought that was a really genius way of breaking things up.
Yeah.
So they tell a story, they took a week or 2 off, tell something else, take a week or 2 off, tell the third one, take a week or 2 off, bring it all together.
It's definitely a unique approach, but I don't know.
It was a little bit experimental. I think it worked in that case. It wouldn't necessarily work all the time.
I don't know that we'll get to see any more of that because I've heard that they were not only picked up for season 6, but that season is now going to be 13 episodes long.
That's interesting. So that probably points to the fact that they might be done after that then.
Yeah.
Usually a regular network show where all of a sudden they do a limited season means that's the last one.
Yeah.
I feel like that happens more often than not.
I would think either done or perhaps going the streaming route.
Interesting. I'd be okay with them being done. I think they've told a good story overall. There's been some ups and downs.
Yeah.
I don't think we need oversaturation of that particular show. It's not like it's
right.
Legendary or iconic television. It's been pretty good.
Well, that brings me to ask you, what do you think, for your absolute ideal, would be the perfect number of episodes for any given season? Because I've heard now, you're for lack of a better word, complaining about 22 plus episodes in a season. Right. Now I'm hearing people on podcasts and on YouTube complaining about 13 episodes. So, I mean, what are we talking about here? 6? Like how?
Well, at a certain point, you're just talking about miniseries then.
Right.
I guess, boy, it might come to the point where we come away from any sort of standardization.
Yeah,
we just come at it with a story. Right. You say, like, here's a 6-episode story. It's gonna come out March 3rd. And then maybe they do like, hey, you know what? We've got a 4-episode story that's coming out in August.
Yep.
And then you just hit random spots. You write a story and you film the number of seasons that's required to tell the story. It's not that simple because actors have schedules and production has schedules and things like that.
Yeah.
So, maybe we'll get to a point where even like the basic formula of, hour-long episodes is going to be up for debate.
Yeah.
It already is to a certain extent. You can watch a show like Stranger Things or Game of Thrones, and which are different because Stranger Things is a streaming show, Game of Thrones is not.
Right.
But one episode will be, so we'll stick with Stranger Things. One episode will be 42 minutes. The next one will be an hour and 7 minutes. The next one will be 53 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so they're already coming off of being super standardized with it. Maybe eventually we'll get to a point where you just tell the story.
Yeah.
I guess that's ideal, but, you know, it would leave something to be desired if you really want to see something more. I don't know if there's a perfect...
Yeah.
I don't know if there's a perfect way to answer that question. I don't know that I have a perfect ideal for that.
I guess it also depends on how you're consuming it. Are you sitting down to binge watch it all in one sitting, or are you doing it, one or two a day? Are you doing it weekly?
Yeah. I mean, I've watched 10-episode shows that felt thin.
Yeah.
I mean, I made the mistake of sitting through the OA.
Oh, right.
On Netflix, which was just... And, it was only like 10 or 11 episodes, and that felt like they stretched it to make 10 episodes.
Wow.
And other shows, you feel like, oh, how are they going to finish this off? You know, we're already at episode 9. How is this possible? So it just depends on the show and the story.
Well, that was my criticism a bit with Cobra Kai, which is also 10 episodes, and kind of the opposite. Like, they didn't necessarily have to stretch anything, but they were at the last. I felt in the last really like 3 episodes, they were just like. Characters were just transforming in the space of an episode to suddenly like complete their arc, and it felt very rushed. And like I was telling you off the air, it's a bit surprising to me that it has a perfect score on Rotten Tomatoes. I like it because I like the property, I like the characters, and I'm happy to see it succeed and continue. Even though it's something I love, I'm a little more critical than the reaction seems to indicate, but I hope that since there now definitely is going to be a season 2, they will kind of fix those little nitpicks.
Right. I think that, and that show's only half-hour episodes too.
Yeah.
So that's only telling a 5-hour story, really.
Right.
So which is basically, it's 2 feature-length movies. 2 long ones, I guess, miniseries, basically.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is. I don't know how this fits into the categories of good and bad, but I think having some of these shows gives the people involved a chance to create on a more broad scale. And sort of as a, just a dabbler in creative things, like I can understand like not wanting to be tied down to this one thing all the time.
Yeah.
And it's easy to sort of nitpick at that because it's like, you should appreciate it. You're getting paid however much to play this character, but I understand why, an actor wouldn't want to just be one character all the time in everything he or she does.
Yeah.
So, again, this isn't really from a consumer perspective. This is from a performer / somebody involved in the business perspective. But being involved in sort of a high-concept show that runs one 10-episode season a year gives you an opportunity to stretch your legs in other ways, I would think.
Yeah. I think that overall that probably will be a positive thing for the industry side of it, the insider industry end of it, where people will overall be like less burnout, I guess.
Right.
More creative satisfaction.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see how that plays out in terms of like, the final product and how people kind of receive it. But, I guess it's all still too new to really try to predict either way.
Right. The only other thing I have on this subject, and again, I don't know if this is good or bad, but I saw it, and I can't remember who said it or where I read it, so apologies for not giving proper credit, but there's so much content now. Like, as a consumer, that's great for me. I like a lot of different kinds of things, and I can go find them now. But having so many options means there's rarely as many eyes on a single thing.
Yeah.
So there's less ubiquity in a show.
Right.
Like there's a lot of shows over the years everybody was watching. Everybody's watching this, everybody's watching. Because you only had that and 2 other options.
Exactly.
But now you have, not infinite, but, pretty damn close to infinite options in terms of what you're going to spend your time watching. So there's less sort of, well, like I said, ubiquity in what all eyes are on. So there's very few shows. So you have, Game of Thrones is probably the one right now, even though
the big one, yeah.
We're, it's sort of on hiatus. They're filming, but it's going to be a while before we get to see it. That's probably the biggest one at the moment. But I feel like in past decades or periods of time, there would be, at least 3 or 4 shows at any given time.
Yeah.
That, all eyes were on. And maybe that doesn't happen to quite the same extent anymore because, your eyes don't have to be on it because you have other options.
Yeah, that's kind of the trade-off, the cultural trade-off, I guess, that you're kind of killing off the water cooler conversation element of TV shows, the shared experience that you were able to basically assume that most everybody in the world was watching the same thing you are.
Yeah.
Or now you basically have to turn those water cooler conversations into, oh, you didn't watch that? Well, what about this one? Try to cycle through them rapidly.
Or try to sort of recruit people.
Yeah.
You should really watch it. You should catch up so we can talk about it. It's really good. I mean, I've done that before. I turned a couple people at work onto the show Preacher because I really like it and I was watching it in the first season and nobody else was watching. I'm like, give it a try.
But that's your whole conversation at the water cooler at that point. Just the pitch, not the actual discussion of the show.
Yeah. I'm the publicist in a way.
Yeah.
Where's my check?
It's interesting how that's evolved. I suppose that wraps up our prediction and analysis of TV viewing habits and delivery systems. But stick around for Need It, Got It. Got it. Today, on this installment of Need It, Got It, we're going to touch on the relationship that we both have to action figure collecting and the origins of how we got into it. I know for me, it's a pretty odd story, I guess, kind of like everything else in my life. I used to have a subscription to a magazine called Disney Adventures throughout most of the 90s. And in one of those issues, they had an interview with this guy named, I think it's pronounced Colonel Alicio. He played Alyssa Milano's character's boyfriend on Who's the Boss in the later seasons. And for whatever reason, that's who they were interviewing. And he mentioned that he collected action figures. You would read these, getting these magazines in the mail. I mean, they were actually pretty thick, so there's a lot to go through. And you kind of looked at the cool parts, and then you got desperate when you were waiting for the next issue to come, but it hadn't happened yet. So you just read these random interviews, and finally when I did, he said that. And for whatever reason, until I read that, I owned plenty of action figures, but I never thought of it as something that you could consciously collect, even though there'd been plenty of times in the past with things like the Ninja Turtles where we would have our mom specifically buy a bunch in a certain series. And I remember the little static figures that they made for the movie Willow. We actually got the complete set of those. And it's a collection at that point, that's what you're doing. But I never thought of it that way until I read him say that. So for whatever reason, it pulled this trigger in my brain, and I started trying to, because I think I was 10 or 11 when I read that. So as a kid, it's kind of hard to leave things in the package. So I remember specifically buying something that I already had opened to try to make it easier. And the first couple of things I got to try to start collecting them properly, I guess, I kind of eventually caved in and opened anyway. But that was probably 92 to 94 in there. And then once Kenner re-released Star Wars figures in late 95, I got it was called the Power of the Force, or I guess in collecting it's known as Power of the Force 2 because there was an 80s Power of the Force as well.
Right.
But I got the Luke and Vader from that line, and I was off to the races. And basically I've been collecting action figures since 1995, which is crazy to think about now.
Yeah, that is a long time ago. It's over 20 years ago. Mine isn't really quite as specific as that, but yeah, I think it was definitely the that Star Wars Kenner line, because I had I remember when I was a young kid, in the early to mid 80s, we would go visit my Grammy, who lived in Virginia, and for a while she lived with her sister in a condo. Her sister and her husband, her sister's husband, not her husband. Anyway, and my mom's cousins would come around to visit sometimes. I think one of them lived there for a little bit, for a year or two, and they were older high school kids going into college at this point. and they had he had a bunch of these old Star Wars figures, like the original ones from like, 78 on, through the original movies. And he didn't want them anymore, so he gave them to me. And those are how I got those. And I do remember getting some, like specific figures and play sets for like Christmas or like for my birthday or something when I was younger. I remember specifically the Lando Skiff Guard figure from Return of the Jedi, and I got that Ewok treehouse village playset or whatever. You remember that one definitely.
Yeah, I drool over that one.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome. I got that was like one of my big Christmas presents that year, was that Ewok playhouse. He kept saying playhouse. It was their tree fort or whatever, tree village. It was their tree house.
Yeah, the Ewok village, I think it's officially named, and it was oddly enough, it was later reused for the Kevin Costner Robin Hood movie line as like the Sherwood Forest playset.
That's right. Yeah, they probably had the same molds.
Yep.
But yeah, that's when I remember. But I didn't start collecting them then. I was, it was the same thing like you. I took them out and I played with them, and obviously the ones that I had inherited, from my cousin there, or well, my second cousin there, were, they were taken out of the package. They were played with. Like I most of them had their accessories though, like they had the guns and stuff. But of course, I lost those, and who knows how many my mom sucked up with a vacuum cleaner. But yeah, I don't remember specifically being interested in collecting them until that line came out, because that's when, in conjunction with Wizard magazine, there was that Toy Fair magazine, and they had price guides on like how much these old toys were worth. Obviously, like in the package unopened, they were worth like thousands of dollars. But even like if they were just like a loose figure, I remember like that Boba Fett holiday promo figure. It was like that early. It was like an early release figure or something.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I had that one, and I mean, just loose, I think it was worth like $50 or something. I was like, wow, like out of the package, no. I mean, I don't know if it's worth that anymore, but out of the package with no accessories, it was still worth like $50. And I was like, wow, maybe we should like start collecting. So that's when I got into the phase of the same time, because of course we did this together for a long time.
Yeah.
That's where I got interested in collecting the actual figure and not playing with it, and getting into the whole thing. And we had tons of those Star Wars re-released Kenner figures, So that was pretty cool. But
what's weird, I think, that whole like appearance and re-release of Star Wars figures, resuming of production on them, kind of sparked like obviously Star Wars in general, like as a passion for the two of us and our friends from that point for, I don't know, at least a good 5-6 years, the rest of the 90s anyway. And it kind of, it also did the same thing culturally for Star Wars. It was basically the end of about a 10-year period of kind of cultural dormancy for Star Wars in general. And 95 was the year the toys came back out. 95 was also the year that they released the VHS, like, original trilogy versions one last time, I think the marketing was.
Yeah, the originals one last time. Well, because they were gearing up for the special edition, so that was like the last time he was offering the original remastered, theatrical version or whatever. So.
Right. So I remember, I think didn't you get those for Christmas too, or something?
Yeah, I had them. I don't know where they are now. I wish I did, but I'm pretty sure I probably got rid of them or they broke or something. But yeah, I got that set for Christmas. Yep.
I ended up buying a set from Video Circus when they were going out of business. They had like a complete set, so I just gave them. I think it only cost me like fucking $10 or something. Yeah. But yeah, so I still have those. It's pretty cool. But yeah, so it was all about Star Wars kind of from that point on. But I mean, you kind of, it kind of sparked like a collecting run for you. You got out of it, I think, a few years later. I have a bunch of your old stuff, but
yeah, it's true.
How long would you say that you kind of kept collecting for, like consistently?
Well, I would say I guess I would say like with the specifically, because like I did buy a couple of things here or there. I remember like I bought a couple of like wrestling action figures that I saved because that was a time that we were really interested in professional wrestling again too. But I would say probably Star Wars. I remember up through my senior year, I still collected them because the Phantom Menace came out. Around that time period. So they started releasing figures for that too, so I remember buying those in the store. I remember I got one for my birthday. For some reason, it was like that Kiadi Mundi weird head-shaped guy or whatever his name was. So I mean, I would say probably up until I left for the Navy, because obviously, like in boot camp, you can't do stuff like that. And then, I mean, I probably remember buying them here and there. I mean, I bought a couple when Force Awakens came out, but I mean, I would say definitely probably after I left home is probably when I stopped and like lost a little bit of interest in it, So I mean, I didn't really keep it up for all those years. But I remember even when you worked in Toys R Us a couple of years later, we were looking for stuff in there,
Yeah, definitely.
When I come and visit, yeah.
That was actually probably the biggest. I actually think if I hadn't worked there, I probably would have fallen out of toy collecting as well, just kind of naturally. But the fact that the period of time that I worked at Toys R Us kind of saw was like when they were clearancing a lot of the leftover stock from the line that got us back into it, like the Power of the Force line. And at the same time, they had like a ton of extra Episode 1 toys. So I could pick up whatever I didn't get initially from the previous line, as well as the Episode 1 toys for, $2-3 a pop.
Wow.
And they were just trying to get rid of everything because, like we were talking about before, everybody thought that that if they bought a bunch of Star Wars toys, they were going to be rich someday. So they overproduced like crazy to meet this imaginary demand, especially when Episode 1 came out. That's notoriously, like, there's probably somebody somewhere with a clearance bin full of them to this day. There's so many overproduced. So, like, I was able to get even, like, vehicles for, like, $5 a pop when they were normally, like, 20, 30, 40.
Yeah, those were the more expensive items, were the vehicles or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, some of those are holding their value somewhat, especially the vehicles, but, like, a lot of the 90s figures are actually, like, worth the same or less right now than what I fucking paid for them, so.
Yeah, that kind of sucks.
But, yeah, if I hadn't worked there and they hadn't been so many cheap, examples of the stuff I needed, I probably would have fallen out. But I didn't. I mean, I've definitely in the last probably 5 to 10 years, I've slowed down immensely. I mean, I buy maybe on average, 0 to 5 toys a year now. I'm not doing anything specific anymore. The Star Wars thing is always kind of an omnipresent category. Whenever a new movie comes out, I'll usually get like a couple of the characters I think are cool, and it's kind of this thing I do where I have to get like the Darth Vader from each line because there always is one.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Well, that's like, that's like probably the most iconic figure of the whole thing too, one of them anyway, so that's pretty neat that they do that. Right.
And it's never going to be like, I don't know, something where you look at and you're like, that looks stupid actually. I don't know why I bought that because, I mean, it's Darth Vader. He's always going to look cool.
Yeah. Well, I remember the one I had that was worth a lot at the time was when they did the original re-release in 95. They had like 5 or 6 characters that they put out initially or something like that, or 8 or 10. I had the Darth Vader, and I got it right when it came out, so it had the long lightsaber.
Right.
And which they thought was like a choking hazard, so they ended up, pulling it off the shelf and putting the shorter lightsaber. But because remember, there was like the variation, like you had the long lightsaber, or you had the short lightsaber and the long lightsaber tray, and then you had the short one. So I had the original long one. And I remember that Princess Leia figure was worth quite a bit at the time too. It was worth like a $30 or $40 figure. I had that one, and but yeah, I mean, I guess like, what if I ever bought action figures after my moving away from home era, it was probably if it was like a sports figure that I liked, because I know McFarlane Toys, like, they were like the preeminent toy manufacturer, at least for collectible figurines or whatever. He did really good sports lines throughout the years, and I want to say like they still do. I can't remember, but
I think so.
Yeah, because I mean, I had a bunch of Wayne Gretzky McFarlane figures that came out. I think you actually have them now. I had you hold on to them for me or something, I think.
I have a Gaboric that you have.
Mary Gaverick, right? Yeah, and they were, so that was like my focus if I ever saw like a figure I wanted. It was usually like a sports figure or whatever. So
right.
this is the last thing I'm going to say before we put a button on it here. I think one of the major things that makes it not only difficult to continue collecting like that now, and also makes it unappealing, actually, is how expensive toys in general have gotten, and how a lot of like the stuff that is specifically made for quote unquote the adult collecting market is distributed. A lot of like the trend now for these kinds of things is to sell a subscription service to action figures. The first instance of this that I knew of was Mattel came out with something called Matty Collector, where you could buy. They made kind of like newer versions, like more detailed versions of the classic Masters of the Universe figures. So like everybody who was into that wanted them like crazy, so they knew they were gonna make a ton of money. But you know, they could only buy them online from their website, and if you wanted to buy them individually, they started out at $30 a piece.
Wow!
And if you wanted to pay for the subscription to get them all, you had to like wait till like the end of the year, and it was like $250 or $300 for the whole thing. And now, like, I don't think Mattel does it directly. They sold the rights to a company called Super 7, but they still kind of use the same practices. And it's even more now. Like, it's just insane.
That's crazy. Like,
yeah, I mean, you just can't. Like, you're like, oh, awesome. Where do I sign? Oh, well, never mind that. I mean, it's just crazy. Like, now Hasbro, who actually bought out Kenner, they make the Star Wars figures now, and now they're doing like a similar thing. I forget the name of their subscription service, but it's, you know, it's something stupid. But it's controversial right now because they just came out with this version, this like super big, super detailed version of Jabba the Hutt's sail barge from Return of the Jedi.
Okay.
I think it's called the Katana. Anyway.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So like they took it even a step further than subscription. They went straight up crowdfunding. Basically, they like begged people for money to fucking like, oh, if we hit this figure, we can get this made. I'm like, wait a minute, aren't you like $1 billion toy company? Like, what are you doing?
Like, what are you doing?
Right.
Like...
So of course, all the fucking suckers opened their wallets and they got it funded, so it's gonna be made. But it's like, I think it's like $300 on top of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm sure Steve Sansweet was the first one to jump in there and be like, I'll pay for it. That's crazy. And, you know, that makes it sound like really, I mean, it's obviously not that complicated of a process, but I mean, that makes it a little bit more complicated for a collector.
Yeah.
You know, like, well, you not only can you not, like you said, you had to wait and then pay that at the end of the year to get it or whatever. It was just like, that's stupid. Like, just stop.
Well, you had, you had to pay it up front and then just like wait months and months to actually see like the result of it. And then like, especially in the days of the Master of the Universe stuff, there were so many like production flaws. Like figures would show up with like shoulders that were like reversed, so like their arms run backwards and stuff like that. So it's just like, you know, and then I guess like the customer service end of it, like trying to resolve those problems was a nightmare. And I'm glad I stayed out of it.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's dumb. I mean, especially like in this day and age too. Like, you know, when did that ever really happen? You know, when we were growing up with like just like horrible production issues, you know what I mean? Like,
right.
You never, I mean, there was like a little thing here and there, like I said, with the lightsabers, but that wasn't like, they just said like it was like a choking hazard or something. Like it was too long of a thing. Like I guess like a kid couldn't swallow it all the way or something. I don't even know. I'm just throwing this out of my ass. But yeah, it's just like you don't hear stuff like that. It's like you said, like with the crowdfunding thing, it's like, aren't you a company that makes these for a living? Like, why do you got to crowdfund something like that? Right. I mean, it's like with that whole thing with the comic shop we talked about a couple of years ago, where they were like begging for money or they were going to go out of business. And it's just like, you're a business. If you can't make it, you go out of business. That's what happens. You know? Ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, that's where my collecting stands today. I get to look through the window at all the fun everybody who has more money than me is having.
Yeah, that's the thing too. It's not even like we can do it casually. It's like expensive. It's like,
yeah.
I mean, that's the way baseball cards are now too. It's like I got to pick and choose what I'm going to do because baseball cards are so expensive nowadays. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But
I feel like
that'll be another topic for another time. Like how much of a rip off baseball cards. Oh, do I got stories to tell you on that one?
We look forward to hearing that on the next installment of Need It, Got It.
Might not be the next one, but sometime soon.
Got him, need him, got him, need him, need him, got him, need him.
The N.E.R.D.Bomber podcast is a Ghost Factory internet production brought to you by the WEM Network.